35 years after the U.S.-led military coalition wrested Kuwait from Iraqi occupation, a memorial to honor the service members who served, and the 383 who died in operations has found its home on the National Mall in Washington, D.C.
We are in what's called Area 1 of the National Mall. The reserve was meant to be a completed work of kind of cultural landscape. So we are as close to it as we could get with the authorization. So that's why the site here again is so important. Other aspects included being near Vietnam. Many of the kind of younger enlisted and officers in Vietnam ended up serving as senior commanders in Desert Storm.
As work went on to put finishing touches on a memorial 16 years in the making, officials gave a sneak peek of the site to the media.
These are essentially modeled on what's called Barkhan dunes, which are the form of dune that is in the kind of Kuwaiti and Iraqi desert. They're kind of low, and they have these arms that kind of come out when they blow with the wind. So we utilize those two forms to create the space, and kind of everything is encapsulated into there. We also kind of oriented them a little bit to create a priority for entry and kind of a lesser opening for the exit. And the idea is that you move around in the left hook kind of fashion that was so critical to the veterans, that movement in the operation. So this is the main entry we enter in. This is called the storm wall, which is really reflecting the speed and the power of the conflict, the buildup and everything. And then a more reflective inscription wall, which is really to remind everyone that this all-volunteer force was there ready to lay down their lives. And there were people that were killed and injured and so forth. And so the idea that while it was a great success, it did not come without cost. In the center is what we're calling the Coalition Grove. There's a unity shield which basically lists all the countries that helped. This was the largest coalition ever since World War II, and even bigger than World War II in some ways, that formed to kind of enforce those UN resolutions and the military action.
The whole idea of why this site was so important to us is that we could have had another location, I'm not going to mention where, but that we could have had vertical elements, we could have gone as high as we wanted. We felt that we needed to have, and I coined the term, and it's a little bit corny, so please bear with me, but during a commission meeting I stated, we want something that is visible, but also visitable. And that's what we have achieved here, because the National Park Service has estimated that we conservatively are going to be receiving anywhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 million annual visitors.
We couldn't bring the sand and the stone from Kuwait here, but the idea was to kind of bring that kind of color and texture and roughness. But this is the main commemorative wall here, is the inscription wall. It was really about to kind of convey the operation kind of as a big collage, and the idea that the services are representative. It's meant to kind of convey movement and power. Peaking at its height is kind of the human element, the most detailed figures. So we've got the buildup, which kind of displays the kind of maritime operation, the logistics, and kind of the initial bombardment, the ground war, kind of a more intense focus on the kind of individuals that participated. And then afterwards, the kind of aftermath, the oil fires, and then the sunrise of the new day on Kuwait.
Noting that veterans from the association went over, quote, every inch of belt buckle, machine gun sight, and chin strap for accuracy. The design conjures up the impression of a sandstorm and mirrors the famous left hook maneuver, where U.S. military leaders sent troops deep inside Iraq to block the Iraqi forces' northern escape. The spiral pattern, officials noted, is meant to portray the, quote, kinetic movement of the campaign.
The left hook was one of the most important things, organizing the memorial around the idea of the left hook because it was so central to the success of the operation. I think the idea of expressing the context in some way of the colors and the sands and the sights and sounds. Now, we're on the National Mall. We're under the kind of review of a lot of agencies and so forth. So there was the veterans on one side, there was the Commission of Fine Arts on the other, and guess who was in the middle, right? So we were trying to navigate in a way that we didn't water it down. At the same time, the site was so important, we had to kind of deal with some of the restrictions in terms of height and so forth. This is our unity shield. You can see the country names are all around it, the coalition. The idea that this was a shared effort, so not only were all the U.S. servicemen and women, willing to risk everything for the mission and the importance of the, kind of liberating Kuwait, but all the other countries participated. Some participated materially with military hardware and troops, others financially and so forth. So the idea that it took all of this under the U.S. leadership to liberate Kuwait. So this is kind of the idea of everyone was in this together, kind of creating that shield for Kuwait, the idea of this kind of shield of antiquity, if you will. In the center, where the water comes out from under that kind of cap, is the arfaj flower, which is the national flower of Kuwait. And this is kind of more traditional, shield and almost Middle Eastern patterning to create elements that the water will react to and kind of bounce its way down.
This memorial was especially difficult from the standpoint that it is not a solitary message as Vietnam is. Vietnam is a place of mourning. And although remembering the fallen here, and we have done that, is very, very important, we also have to remember that there is a celebratory aspect in that. It was a successful war, and that we had very, very low casualty counts comparative to other previous and subsequent conflicts. I had been to a number of veteran events put on by veteran service organizations that would remember past events and recognize past veterans and those who were fallen, and they would skip right over this like it never happened. And I felt like that wasn't right, and I put myself in the shoes of those Gold Star family members. How would I feel if my loved one's service was just basically overlooked? And I felt like that was wrong and that something had to be done.
The memorial, while still under construction, is slated to be open to the public on October 24th, 2026.